Good morning, everybody. We're going to let participants roll in for a minute, and then we'll get started shortly. I'm sure people will keep coming in, but I think it's best that we get started to not keep everybody waiting. And my name is Neil Sorensen. I'm from the Land Portal Foundation. Thanks to everybody for joining us here today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. This event that we've put together is on the operationalization of the voluntary guidelines on the governance of tenure through innovative mechanisms in open and transparent land governance. And we are really proud to have a big range of wonderful partners on board with us today for this webinar. We have partnering with us today, we have the Chandler Foundation, the Liberia Land Authority, the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, and the Open Data Charter. And so we really appreciate the opportunity that the Committee on Food Security has given us today to be a part of this the CFS 48 and to hold this important side event. Now, I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce the chair of our event. His name is Javier Molina Cruz. He is the Senior Land Tenure Officer for Inclusive Rural Transformation and Gender Equity, and for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And we're really pleased to have him be leading this webinar today. Now, he'll be introducing our esteemed panelists and moderating the discussion today. I'll be sliding into the background, but welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Javier, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Good morning, everyone. Thanks all of you for making time to be with us today and be part of this conversation on how the VGGTs are being used and can be used to strengthen and secure tenure rights, particularly those of most vulnerable people whose rights are not have not been recognized. We have, as you know, this side event, which is organized on the sidelines of the CFS 48. The CFS is the, as you know, the platform that endorsed the voluntary guidelines. And now we will look into how the VGTs are a tool to, again, secure tenure rights by the different people, including women, indigenous people, small farmers, whose rights have not been recognized. This event will look specifically into how those rights are being allocated, how they are transferred, and how transactions are undertaken. As you may recall, the voluntary guidelines are specifically Article 7 calls for governments to identify tenure rights who have not been secured, those who are the rightful holders, legitimate holders of those rights, and facilitate their recognition. As we know, having secure tenure rights is central for livelihoods, to secure investments, and to promote sustainable food systems in the long run. So we are talking about a central issue, which again has to do with securing tenure rights, for which we need open and transparent systems. We'll have a good lineup today here. We have a good, solid experts who will share with us their expertise, their views on how the VGTs can be used to improve, promote, have these open and transparent systems to secure tenure rights. We have Sam, our colleague Sam Zoke-Burki, Senior Legal Researcher for the Columbia Center for Sustainable Investments. That's the Earth Institute, I believe, Columbia University of New York. He will not be with us today, but he has prepared a video that will show us the work they have been doing on land investments and how that involved local people recognizing legal rights and participation of those involved in those investments. Then we have Tim Hampstead, leads of the Chandler Foundation as his first CEO, based in Seattle. And he has worked with Landesa, and Landesa, as you know, is an institution with extensive expertise on tenure issues. We have now Natalie Carfi from Argentina. She's the Deputy Director of the Open Data Charter, and she will share with us her views and expertise on this matter. Next, we'll have our colleague, Laura Mellolaro. She is the team leader of the Land Portal Foundation, who actually has, facilitated the organization of this side event. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Land Portal. And she will share with us her views, expertise on how data is being exchanged, how policy dialogues are being promoted to further enhance tenure rights. And we have, last but not least, Honorable Ellen Pratt, a Commissioner of Land Use and Land Management with the Liberian Land Authority. That will be a great voice from the field to hear how Liberia is dealing with these issues and how the Liberia experience can shed light on the way forward to securing tenure rights. As I said before, unfortunately, Sam Zoke-Burki from Columbia University won't be able to join us, but we have a video that will show us some key messages that they would like to convey to us on this matter. And with this, I will invite the colleagues dealing with the logistics here to let us see the video.
Apologies, we're getting reports that there's no sound. We tested this just earlier, before the webinar started. Audio, can you please, services, can you please help us to check if it's okay?
Hi, I'm Sam Zoke-Burki, Senior Legal Researcher at the Columbia.
Can you hear it now? Okay, yes. People are saying yes. So I'm going to start it again.
Centre on Sustainable Investment. I'd like to thank the organisers and my colleagues on this panel for the opportunity to make this presentation by video ahead of time. Today's topic focuses on innovations in open and transparent land governance, and to borrow from a recent CCSI report on this topic, we must ask, for whom? Transparency initiatives can have a range of beneficiaries, including regulators, community members, citizens, journalists, each of whom may have different needs. So designing systems that meet such needs will be crucial if we want to avoid less dominant actors, such as communities, indigenous peoples and women, being left behind. I'd like to focus on transparency in the context of land-based investments specifically, given the immense land pressures that agribusiness, forestry and renewable energy projects are currently causing. As you can see, land investment transparency has 4 elements. The first is disclosure of all relevant and accurate information in a timely manner. This includes information about actual or proposed investments, including likely impacts and the actors involved. But it also includes information about relevant rights and laws, including the processes through which decisions will be made. CCSI's own effort in this regard is Open Land Contracts, which currently houses 1,500 land investment contracts and other documents from over 50 countries. The next element is access. Communities, citizens, and government actors have to be able to safely access the information. Third is comprehension. Information should be made in understandable formats, which includes translations into local languages and plain language summaries. In the case of open land contracts, for instance, we summarize key contract clauses to aid comprehension for non-legal users. Communities often also need sufficient time to digest information and to access technical support if needed. The final element is information use in open systems. Communities and other actors must be able to access decision-making processes if they want to knowledgeably influence them. I have in mind are wide-ranging and often country-specific. They include processes enabling decisions on land use planning, the design of legal and policy frameworks, through to consideration of proposed investments and the terms of those investments that are granted permits. So this also includes consultations, contract negotiations, impact assessments, as well as monitoring and enforcement, grievance mechanisms, and decisions concerning project closure and what happens to land afterwards. For communities to access these systems, disclosure is crucial, but it's also insufficient. To influence decisions, communities need information, yes, but also power is going to play a prominent role, meaning that communities will often struggle to have their voice heard. They may need skill building and accompaniment from civil society and other support providers to really grasp what is at stake, and confidently decide on and implement the course of action before it's too late. Because communities, including women and indigenous peoples, are so often excluded from these processes, they increasingly are turning to processes to set the agenda themselves before it's too late. Community-led processes include autonomous protocols and bylaws, which explain how customary decisions are made within the community, as well as community-driven visions for how the community plans to pursue its own self-determined development. Community-led data collection is another important tool. This can democratize the information sources feeding into government decisions concerning land, which can otherwise often tilt heavily towards unaccountable company consultants or reporting that may not tell the full story. On the government side, we know that information sharing between agencies remained a challenge. This is not only a technical or a financial challenge, it's also a political one. Public actors might be hoarding information or demanding money for it, precisely because being a gatekeeper to such information brings with it power and influence. So while we can and should innovate on intra-governmental information sharing and coordination, we also have to empower those good faith actors within government, sometimes referred to as reformers, who earnestly seek to uphold their mandates, but are too often stymied by pressure from above to not make things difficult for certain investors. On this topic, CCSI is currently working to empower specific governmental actors and is preparing a brief on how such actors can build political support to translate good ideas into practice as part of our Align project with IIED and Namati. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for that video. I hope that most of you were able to listen to and follow through the whole presentation, despite of some minor noises that we heard. However, and I think we were able to hear some key messages here and some key words that I heard, including, for instance, information, access to information and data, consultation process, and decision-making within the communities themselves. I think those are key words to an open and transparent systems in land governance. So I would like to hear from Tim, who comes from a very extensive background, particularly when I hear that you work with Landesa. Landesa is a well-recognized institution with extensive expertise on these issues. What are your views on this? What are your take on these issues? Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Javier, and good morning to everyone. I want to start by just giving a shout out, given this is a CFS side event, to the CFS for their role in developing, in endorsing, and maintaining the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure. I think it's been about 9 years since they were endorsed, and they've served as I think great guidance for governments in making steps forward to improve governance of land tenure. But I want to provide just the kind of the big picture here. Today's session involves the intersection of two topics that I believe deserve to be much more elevated on the global development agenda. This is the first being secure land rights, and the second being corruption. And it's worth, I think, taking a big picture view of these two topics and their intersection before delving into the specifics. So first, on secure land rights, why are they important and deserving of more attention? Well, in sum, the well-being of every person on the planet, and indeed the well-being of the planet itself, depends on secure land rights. Secure land rights and capable land institutions are a cornerstone of any modern economy. Strong land rights upheld by land institutions provide housing security, they give confidence to individuals to invest in land and businesses, they help bolster food security, they allow companies and households to more easily access financing, they enable governments to collect property taxes, they're a foundation for environmental stewardship, and you know, we could go on and on about their importance. And they're particularly important for the poorest people on the planet, a large majority of whom rely on land-based livelihoods, and yet their relationship to the land on which they depend, their land rights, is often lacking, which constrains their ability to grow food, to have a voice, to build wealth, and to resiliently manage the inevitable hardships that life brings. So without secure land rights, which are made possible in significant part by responsible land governance institutions that accurately gather and maintain land data, societies risk missing the foundation for sustainable prosperity. That's a problem for all people, but it's particularly a problem for the lives and the livelihoods of those living at the margins. But open and transparent land governance is also necessary to fight the cancer of corruption. And corruption, like secure land rights, is another topic deserving of much more attention on the global development agenda. Corruption erodes trust, it weakens democracy, it hampers economic development, further exacerbates inequality, poverty, social division. And broadly speaking, levels of corruption are highly correlated with the lack of prosperity. And high corruption is one of the best proxies for governance. Corruption is just a cancer. It's a cancer that substantially limits the ability of government institutions, including land institutions, to provide the good governance necessary to build an inclusive prosperity. And unfortunately, land agencies are often among the most corrupt of government agencies. That's what research from around the world tells us. It also tells us that 1 in 5 people worldwide have paid bribes to access land services. In some countries, that number rises to 1 in 2. And such land corruption can flourish when, of course, the land governance institutions lack transparency. So to fight corruption, we have to embrace transparency. And transparency is all about knowing the who, the why, the what, the how much. It means shedding light on the formal and informal rules, processes, actions, and data. And transparency is not only about making the information available, but ensuring it can be easily accessed, understood, and used by citizens. So in sum, and I know this is like very simplistic for some people, but I think this big picture is important. Weak land rights and corruption are major problems constraining inclusive development and food security. Now, there is reason for hope, and I think much reason for hope, particularly the ongoing revolution in information and communications technology provides unprecedented opportunities to gather the needed land data, to document and protect land rights, to digitize land records and make them more open and transparent. And doing so has the potential to clarify the land rights of literally hundreds of millions of people globally and limit the scope for corrupt practices. So in closing, I would just highlight 4 recommendations for governments seeking to reduce corruption and make development more inclusive as they document, digitize, and open up land records. So first, important to carefully verify and upgrade the existing land records through a robust community-led process before digitizing records. And the reason is that digitizing inaccurate or incomplete paper records that exist in many settings has the potential of perpetuating problems by further validating existing inaccuracies that frequently benefit the powerful. Second, ensure the active participation of women and disadvantaged groups. While a land system that works for the vulnerable will also work for the well-connected, but the inverse is often untrue. So women, disadvantaged groups must play an active role, not only in collecting the data, but also in the creation and evolution of the land record system itself. Third, to increase transparency and to fight corruption, land data should be open by default. Now, there can be exceptions to this, but any exceptions should be clearly justified as being necessary to protect the disadvantaged. And finally, and with this I'll close, land governance systems need to be fit for purpose and context. That is, current technological possibilities alone should not dictate the design of open land data systems. Instead, it's very important for governments to establish their own goals and their own priorities, create an open land data system to fulfill their needs, and those needs consistent with the voluntary guidelines. And it's important that context really matters. What works in one setting may not work in another, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that later. So Javier, sorry I've gone on too long. With that, I'll close and look forward to the questions that come up later in the discussion.
Thank you so much, Tim. I think you touched upon very key issues concerning land administration systems, and that have to do with data, access to data, data availability, then land institutions, the working of land institutions, and so these are key issues because data has to do with land records, and land records lead to land rights. Who owns what and where? So recognizing the relevance of data, accessibility, reliability of data, I would like to invite now our colleague Natalie Carfy, who is the Deputy Director of the Open Data Charter. And she has experience working also with the Undersecretary of Public Innovation and Open Government in Argentina. What is your experience on dealing with data, open data, making data accessible to people, and how you collect that data in a way that you are sure that is reliable? I would like to remind all colleagues, all participants to pose any questions, to pose any comments, reactions through the functions, the questions and chat functions, so that we can engage more actively in this conversation. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you very much, Javier, and thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to the Land Portal for organizing the event. I'm going to use a short presentation just to introduce the work that we've done so far. Let me go through these seconds of trying to figure out the best way to showcase. I guess everybody should be watching now the presentation. So as Javier said, I'm Natalia Carfy. I'm the interim executive director now of the Open Data Charter. Have been working on open data and open government for over 10 years. I'm glad to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about us and about the work that we've done on open data. So the Open Data Charter is a collaboration between governments and experts working on open data. It was funded almost 6 years ago now, because we turned 6 in September. And it was a collaborative work around 6 principles to open up data on any topic and for every level of governments. So now we have 82 governments that have endorsed and adopted the charter, and 73 organizations worldwide that have already also endorsed and adopted the charter as their way of working with open data. These are the 6 principles. So we are an organization, but also a text. And so these are the 6 principles that we work with alongside with our partners, our endorsers and our adopters. The first one being open by default. So we believe that governmental data should be open by default. As Tim said, of course, there's certain limitations to that, like personal data or national security data, but the default should be open. It should be open in a timely and comprehensive manner in order for it to be actually important to understand what's going on and what government is actually doing. It should be accessible and usable, and that goes straight into the formats. Then, of course, standards and interoperability, it's important. So the data should be comparable so that we can understand also what each level of government is actually doing and what governments are doing, and trying to compare and understand what's going on in the overall picture. And then the last 2 principles go more into objectives, like we want to make sure that open data actually improves governance and citizen engagement, because it promotes data-driven policy development and data-driven engagement, and promote participation. And then, of course, understanding that the public value of that data can actually help inclusive development and innovation. So those are the 6 principles of the Open Data Charter. And with that in mind, we started working on this data to impact framework. I'm just going to go really quick around this, but when open data as a movement, as a policy first started almost 12 years ago, every government was trying to kind of tick the policy by creating an open data portal and just publishing any type of data that they could. Without thinking about the objective of opening up data. Opening up data was the objective. After a couple of years of maturing, we understood, and the Open Data Charter actually coined the phrase, publishing with a purpose. So we need to understand the problem that we're trying to tackle while opening up data. First, think about the problem in a collaborative way with citizens, with the people that will be impacted for the better or for the worst when you publish the data, and then understand the process that data is going to go through in order to be published. We know that opening up data is not easy, it's not even for free. You need to have a team in order to be able to secure that you're publishing high quality data, that there's no personal data in those data sets that you're going to open. So understanding the purpose and prioritizing data, it's an important step before opening up governmental data. So publish with a purpose it's even a seventh principle that anybody should understand when talking about open data and open data policies implementation. So the Open Data Charter has always worked with a collaborative approach to things. So we know about open data, but we're not specialists, thematic specialists. So we've partnered with organizations from around the world in order to create these tools, these practical tools that we call the Open Up Guides. So we've created four. Laura is going to talk a little bit more about the land governance one, but I want to give the overall structure of the guide and why it's important that we keep working in this way. So the Open Up Guides, the idea is to understand what are the key data sets that any government can open in order to tackle a specific problem, in this case, these four public issues, in order to start an open data policy around each of these topics. So we've created an agriculture one, a climate action one where we work with the World Resources Institute, the anti-corruption one that actually we've created with Transparency International's chapter in Mexico, and the land governance where we work with Land Portal. The idea is to understand how government collects, manages, and releases sectorial data to improve their connection with data users, the availability and the decision-making and innovation. So these Open Up Guides are practical tools that are online. And we'll go through a couple of examples to let you know how this looks like. So any open up guide actually has key data sets, as I said, like critical data sets, proposals on how they should be collected, stored, shared, and published. We are not reinventing the wheel. If there's already existing standards that are proposed in order to publish any type of data, they will be in the Open Up Guide, for example. So any open contracting data, we promote this standard that Open Contracting Partnership is actually using. Then, of course, we want to be able to leverage what's already been done and what's already been done for good. So we always try to figure out and do research and connect with good data policies and frameworks, understanding which is the metadata that needs to be up there. As I said, standards and the governance frameworks where they are, because not every type of data has a governance framework that's been developed. Try to understand what are the gaps or the challenges of each of these thematic policies, and some use cases, because examples always are helpful to understand the problems, the challenges, and the do's and the don'ts. And for example, just the anti-corruption Open Up Guide, we implemented it in Mexico. You see there's 30 data sets that compose actually the anti-corruption open up guide. But in Mexico, that translated when we did the mapping of the existing data, that actually translated into 72 data sets because of the way the data was being collected and created within government. 60 institutions within the executive branch actually, 60 data sets from within the executive branch actually were leveraged. Some new data sets were created in order to promote publication for anti-corruption, and we understood that there were 350 data points that were feeding into the open data portal, working on open data for anti-corruption. So from theory to practice, there's always a translation, and this was super important. Then we implemented the open up guide on climate action in Uruguay. So we did a mapping from the 72 data sets that are part of the climate action and climate action open up guide. Only 20 had some degree of openness, but we were working with the Ministry of Environment and AGESIC, which is the digital agency there. And we worked with them and with data reusers and people from the climate action community to co-create a strategy for opening up data. And since then, 29 new data sets have been opened. We have worked within government to improve data skills, and new visualizations from data reusers have been created, to showcase the greenhouse gas emissions. So people are already using the new data sets. What we've learned so far by implementing the open up guides that we've implemented so far, it's important to talk about data interoperability, but also about people interoperability, participation and collaborative co-creation and prioritization of key data sets. It's important. Within government, many times we see that there's no cooperation even within agencies. So we kind of started talking it maybe as kind of a joke about people interoperability, but it's actually one of the key ideas and the key takeouts that we got from these implementations. We need to build those bridges. We help build those bridges, even as a strategy, because the Open Data Charter is not going to be there for forever. So we leave those connections done. The guides are useful for these multi-stakeholder conversations when we talk with NGOs, with universities, with different communities. Having a framework such as a guide with an already set proposal of key data sets actually helps out in conversations. And for example, the anti-corruption open up guide was taken as the umbrella for a hemispheric open data for anti-corruption program for the whole of the Americas. So this guide actually was the framework where governments discussions took place. So it helped out with a massive conversation. It's really important to engage with possible reusers and get feedback from the very, very beginning of any open data process. Data assessments to understand the situation on key data sets, like if that data is even collected. It's really important, and there's the need to be open about that in order to manage expectations in these participatory processes, understand the situation. It's very important to document the data production and the data quality in order to be able to move forward. And I'm gonna move really, really quickly. Just one of the key ideas is we need to understand that for data to be opened, we need to resource allocation and monitor progress, so that we are open in the prioritization process and how much can be done. And I think I'm done. Yeah, thank you very much for the time. And
Thank you so much, Natalie, or Natalia. Thank you so much very much for your presentation, for all these ideas. I think the role of data, open data, cannot be overemphasized. And although there is a question here from participants concerning privacy issues when we have open data, but we can discuss that during the open dialogue period. Now, I would like to invite our colleague Laura Mejallaro from the Land Portal. They have a very solid, good knowledge on how to handle data, make data available to stakeholders, and engage, facilitate discussion. So, Laura, what will be your views on this issue? Over to you.
Thank you for Javier. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. And let me just continue the conversation that Natalia started on the Open Up Guide that the Land Portal Foundation, together with the Open Data Charter, have created and launched 2 weeks ago, and how they contribute, of course, to the voluntary guidelines, which is and foster open data systems, which is the topic of today's panel. So the Land Portal, as you know, is a promoter of data sharing and is a platform that promotes inclusive dialogue and debates on land data, and which is an issue that has been raised already by my colleagues today. It is why I wanted to start my intervention by quoting, by sharing an insight that I read on a blog that was published on the Land Portal a few days ago by Louisa Johnson, our colleague from the FAO voluntary guidelines team. So Louisa writes, in contrast to other global issues such as the climate crisis, which no single state, no single actor can prevent or fight in isolation. So most land governance issues can be solved within a state. So what does it mean? What does it mean, this sentence? It means that the individual governments are in the driver's seat when it comes to responsible land governance. So they can generate favorable or less favorable conditions to secure land rights. So, and this is precisely why our Open Up Guide on land governance is directed not only, but mainly to governments, because they control most of land data in a country. So governments are the main custodians of land data. So the Open Up Guide is the first of its kind, and is a tool, is a kind of a playbook for governments which who have the mandates or an interest in making their land governance data more open and available. So land governance data is collected by government agencies as they carry out the core land administration functions. It includes tenure of land, the use of land, the development of land for constructions or for agriculture, the value of land, and so on. These are the main data types that the Open Up Guide analyzes. So for monitoring the performance of any data or any indicators relating to these 4 categories of data, you need data to be readily available. So someone already mentioned this, and Natalie already highlighted the importance of data that is timely, up to date, that is standardized and widely distributed to create impact. So some countries are already doing a good job in managing and collecting and publishing open and reusable data. Other countries may seek advice on how to start or how to expand their activities or how to test their work against best practices, best international practices. So the land ownership data still is consistently ranked lowest on the global open data index and the open data barometer. So each and every year, this data is highlighted as the least likely to be opened by government. So government usually do not publish in an open format primary data related to land governance. Why? We identify 4 main reasons for that. And some colleagues have already mentioned some of these reasons. Privacy concern. So land data contains personal data, data that should be restricted, not be published. Because of mismanagement of this data already. This has been mentioned already. In many countries, land the data landscape is characterized by patchy and overlapping record systems. So data is scattered and fragmented across different jurisdictions and land agencies. Some data is not good. There is a lot of gap in the quality of the data. Simply, some data has never been historically collected. Think about customary land rights data that document customary land rights of data related to gender. So, and corruption is maybe another reason, and my colleagues have already explained that corruption is widespread in the land sector. And finally, the lack of know-how, lack of technical capacity. So the capacity gap at the government level has been identified on how government should collect, manage, and publish and license land data. So there is also a technical gap there, and also financial gap as well. Land data and land information yet is a public good. So, and public good has, and the public, so the citizens have a right to access it. So when, my point is, whenever we refer to good land governance, we should also pay attention and refer to good data governance. So data governance should become part of the land governance agenda. And although data cannot be a goal in itself, of course, it's certainly an important means to good land governance. So why open data? So why an open up guide on land governance? So it is true that land governance is particularly vulnerable and prone to corruption. My colleagues have already elaborated on this, but at the same time, this is a practical guide to help government make land administration more efficient, deliver better services, more cost-effective services, including collecting, sharing, and more and better data that civil society can use, our researchers can use, but also companies, private companies can use to generate any impact. So going back to Louisa's blog, this open up guide is somehow similar to the voluntary guidelines in the sense that is a voluntary instrument, but yet is an instrument that promotes reform through multi-stakeholder dialogue, political consensus, and international good practices. In this way is similar. So likewise, our open up guide gives the government, but also anyone else that is involved in land policy from the public sector, from the academia, from the private sector, some direction, no? some guidelines, no? to overcome all the challenges and also the repercussions of the misgovernance of land. So we encourage governments, donors, and key data players to join this conversation, because again, Land Portal is a place for dialogue, for conversation, for collaboration, and this is what we try to encourage within the sector. We want to pilot this guide in several countries, but also we want to improve the guide as a tool, as a model that can drive innovation and positive change in the land governance sector. So the Open Up Guide is open for consultation until end of July. Please have your say. Please share your feedback and be part of the conversation. Thank you so much, Javier. Back to you.
Thank you, Laura. And now we have an invitation from her. So colleagues, take note. And so please, I hope you will be able to participate in this consultation. Now we have our last guest speaker. I see also our colleague Chris Higadorn from CFS Secretariat also would like to join the conversation. I would like to invite first our guest speaker, Ellen Pratt. As I said before, Commissioner of the Land Use and Land Management with the Liberian Land Authority. I think that would be good to hear from her because Liberia is one of the countries at the front line of improving governance of tenures based on the voluntary guidelines. Liberia has been one of the examples we have been looking at in Africa as how to use the VGGTs to improve governance of tenure to secure tenure rights, particularly under customary tenure. I think she will be very happy to share with us her their experience, and I think her experience will also address one of the questions raised there in the question and answer function, which is how the VGTs have been used to help secure tenure rights under customary tenure. And so afterwards, I will let you invite Chris to take the floor. Over to you, Ellen.
Thank you very much. And good morning, good night, good evening. Let me first say thank you to the CFS for this platform, and also to the Land Portal for the invitation to participate. And as many of my colleagues have already stated, a lot of land governance and the initiative and drive for sustainable land governance comes from government. So as the Liberia Land Authority, we play a pivotal role, and we will continue to play a pivotal role in land governance in Liberia. Just to give some background, the Land Authority is a new organization. We were legislated in 2016 as a one-stop shop for land administration in Liberia, simply because of all of the corruption, all of the inequalities, and lack of transparency in land governance spread across a multiplicity of agencies. So this new agency was tasked with a broad mandate, but essentially effective land governance, equitable land governance. And fast forward to 2018, with the help of our multi-stakeholder platform of the VGGT, Liberia passed a landmark legislation in support of land rights called the Land Rights Act, or the Land Rights Law of 2018. We will argue that it is one of the most progressive laws in support of customary land tenure on the African continent. What this law has done is, for the first time in our nation's history, we are recognizing the customary tenure rights of Liberians who have lived on their lands for generations. Prior to this law, all of that land was considered public land. And now, as of the passage of this law, it is customary land. And there are guidelines that customary communities must follow in order to have their land regularized. However, as of the passage of the law, the land is in fact under the ownership or custodianship of the customary communities that have lived on that land. And the VGGT was implemented in Liberia in 2014. And since that time, the consortium made up of cross stakeholders, government, private sector, donor partners, NGOs, CSOs, NGOs, have been instrumental in not only the passage of this law, but also in working with governments to spread the message, if you will. And that is very important, because you have a law, but this law does not answer the question of equality. It does not answer the question of promoting women's land rights in the absence of actions, in the absence of implementation guidelines, in the absence of the actual presence and information shared with the community. So even with the passage of this law, we find that there are several challenges. And one of them, most of our panelists have outlined here today, and that is data. But I will also say that a key challenge for us is the lack of information. And what we've tried to do when we speak about innovation is we've taken what is a very complex law, we've broken it down into simple English, I will say that, because 43% of our population is illiterate. So how do you explain how this law can change your life if you do not speak in the language of the people? So key provisions of the law, particularly the sections that speak to customary land tenure, have been translated into local languages, as well as broken down, for lack of a better phrase, into what we call Liberian English, which is a colloquial form of English that most Liberians speak. And now this message is starting to resonate with our communities. We still have a major challenge of our budgetary constraints as a government to reach the length and breadth and depth of the country to spread this message. But with our partners, particularly the multi-stakeholder platform, we are getting the message across. I think that also the VGGT platform has helped us to coordinate our partners a little bit better, because one of the major issues that we've had as a country is not only is there a lack of data, there's a lack of coordinator data. So you find that many agencies are collecting information, but the platform is not shared, is not interoperable, and we're not speaking to each other. So the messages could get crossed, and that we see happening in the landscape quite a lot. So the Liberia Land Authority is not only trying to, one, promote the messaging, work with communities to get their customary land deeds, and then the supporting structures that follow. So you have a deed to your land. What does that mean for you as a community? We're working with communities to develop land use plans so that they understand or have a vision for how they would like to see their land and how this land could help to promote livelihood creation, poverty alleviation. 54% of Liberia's population lives below the poverty line. Most of that population is in rural Liberia. Most of that population are the people that are affected by this customary land tenure. So it is important, and it's an intrinsic part of our Liberian fabric, that we promote customary land rights, that we support women's land rights, because again, our women are responsible for 70% of our agriculture in the rural communities. They too need land rights in order to continue to farm, continue to care for their families. I've noted what Laura said, that it is governments that are in the driving seat. And I think we take that responsibility very seriously. Not only is this law a catalytic change for Liberia and the Liberian economy, it is also a way to catapult our people out of poverty. And how we do it will be the test of time. I will want to also extend a thank you to the Open Up Guide. I will raise my hand and say that we are prepared to pilot this guide in Liberia. I think I noticed that you're working in our neighboring country, Sierra Leone. So we encourage you to please come across the river and join us, because it is very important. I think one of our major weaknesses is still the data integration. I think Tim also spoke about the importance of not digitizing the wrong information. And we have a plethora of illegal transactions in our land administration system, which is still a manual system. So as we develop our systems, it's important that we digitize correct information. And what does that mean? That means that we as the authority need to understand the data we have. We need to dig deeper into this data, and we need to be able to throw out what is not correct, what is not validated, what has not been vetted, as we migrate from a manual to an electronic and digital system. So I thank you all for the opportunity, and I look forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Yes, indeed, that's very inspiring. I mean, Liberia, as I said before, is one of the countries that have been very proactive in taking up the VGTs to improve governance of tenure. But we are aware, very mindful that quite a few challenges are ahead, lie on the road. And in this regard, I would like to invite now our colleagues from the CFS Secretariat, Chris Hagedorn, to share with us his views on this, because after 8 years, actually it's going to be 9 years of next year going to be 10 of the endorsement of the VGTs, from your perspective, how you see this process is moving forward, considering now that we have some lessons learned and challenges ahead, how we can tackle those challenges, such as we heard corruption. Well, from your perspective, what can be done? Thank you.
Thanks, Javier. It's a pleasure. I don't know if my video can be turned on, but at least you have a picture of what I look like. I also can't tell exactly how many people are with us, but even if it's just 5.
Now you are muted. You are muted, Chris.
Okay. So there we go. Okay. Well, good morning. Thanks, Javier. Thanks, Neil, Laura, Ellen. Great speeches, Ellen. Having your country perspective is so important, and I think you raised some incredibly important points. Look, as part of the representing the CFS Secretariat, the CFS VGGT is certainly one of, or if not the product of which I certainly personally, and I think the team is most proud of, because it really highlights exactly what the CFS was designed to do and reformed to do in 2009. And along with the RIE principles, which often go very nicely hand in hand with the CFS VGGT, there's so much good news to share. Not enough, because we know that the issues of land tenure and land governance, there's just so much work to be done. But this is the ideal process. We had, if you recall, a special session in May 2012, just like our special session tomorrow, where we adopted the VGGT. And this stemmed from at least a decade of great work done at FAO and many other organizations, backed by a report with the CFS high-level panel of experts, and then taken forward over the past 9 years, as Javier said, by FAO, by EFAD, World Bank, the ILC, Land Portal, many others, with help of donor states who funded major products, Germany, Switzerland. There's a number of ones who have put quite a bit of effort into this issue, because they understand how central land is to reaching the VGGTs, to addressing poverty, to addressing women's empowerment, many of the issues Ellen spoke to. So another point, the CFS VGGT has become a global reference document on land governance, on land management, on tenure issues. And of course, we're all very proud of that. And we're finally seeing some of the fruits of that work taking shape, where, for example, in 2019, the UN Conference on Desertification used the CFS VGGT as the global reference document around land degradation neutrality. So it's not only gone beyond CFS and beyond FAO and the other agencies mentioned, but into binding treaty territory. And I think that can't be underestimated. And I think we all need to keep pushing for that, including with the summit this year, the UN Food Systems Summit, highlighting every chance we get as advocates of land tenure, land governance, that this issue can't be underestimated. It is, it ranks up at the top in terms of transformational issues that have to be addressed to reach the SDGs and the ambitions of the summit, and of course the vision of the CFS, particularly for the most poor and vulnerable, where these issues are so acute and so important. So I simply will highlight that the context is the important thing. Liberia's experience. Please, Ellen, join us anytime you want, because your presentation was great. The experience is so relevant, and we'd like to see more of those shared experiences help inform other countries who are struggling with many of these same issues. Gender, empowering women, as you rightly pointed out, the questions of governance and fighting corruption, which undermines so much of the work, the good work that's being done, and data. And I want to encourage everyone. We are not only set to address and approve policy recommendations around innovative approaches to food security and nutrition, such as agroecological and others, tomorrow, but we are also starting, and next year we will adopt voluntary guidelines on women's empowerment, and we hope that this really takes on these questions of land governance as well and is applied in that context. We are also set to produce policy recommendations around data collection and its implementation in policy. And that is also, we will start that work this year, and we'll be continuing until we produce and adopt policy recommendations. So thank you for letting me, I wasn't planning on speaking, but thanks for the chance, Javier, and others. And again, please look to us, join us tomorrow for the CFS 48 special session. Look at our website, because we have links to not only our own videos, but also the documentation, expert reports done by FAO and others. but let's work together and keep pushing forward on this incredibly important topic. Back to you, Javier.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. One key issue, I think, is and was somehow referred to by Ellen, and also you touched upon, is using the VGTs to facilitate access to and recognize their rights, but most vulnerable, including women. And so I would like to invite now one colleague who has some experience to share on this very issue. And in fact, that would address one of the questions raised in the question and answer function here, and examples of country level concrete examples of how these voluntary guidelines have helped secure tenure rights in a way that is participatory, communities themselves collecting data and verifying land rights. So I would like to invite our colleague from FAO, Maria Paula Rizzo, to share with us some experiences. For instance, I can think of Sierra Leone, for example, Guatemala, another one. So I don't want to talk so much. So I would like to invite Maria Paula.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you, Javier, for including me in this conversation. It was a really interesting set of intervention, and all very relevant also to the work that we have been doing in the last 10 years. So I was interested in some of the words that have been used during these interventions, like Tim has mentioned, for instance, secure tenure rights, corruption. Natalia mentioned interoperability of data and people. Sam mentioned assessment and consultation. Laura mentioned link between open data and the voluntary guidelines. The fact that the governments are the guidance of data, and the importance of quality of data and the governance of data. And finally, Ellen mentioned the language, a multi-stakeholder platform, and coordination. And one of the questions was related to the fact that if these activities, these initiatives with, for instance, customary rights and indigenous people are legally recognized by governments. So to me, all of these words, which are not just words, but are much more than words, match very well with the work that we have been doing since 2010, when we started the implementation actually of open source solutions in the area of land administration. So if I can just very quickly provide the background of our work, we started implementing these projects on open source systems, which is the SOLA open source software, because we looked and based our work on three considerations. One is that the access to land and natural resources associated with tenure security. Second is that the effective and transparent land administration is fundamental in ensuring the security of tenure. And then the land administration can improve their services by using digitized systems, computerized systems for land registration. So the system that we have developed, and that then we also extended for the implementation and the operationalization of the voluntary guidelines in the recognition of the legitimate tenure rights. So not just what was called formal land rights, but also extending to the recognition and protection of the legitimate tenure rights with a human-based approach, meaning that we have been working a lot in the context of customary rights, community rights, and and so you mentioned, Javier, the work that we have done in, for instance, in Sierra Leone, where we have used the system that we developed, which is called Open Tenure, for working with communities to protect communities' tenure rights and to include the gender component, so the women, not just the women though, but also the youth of the communities. So I would like to highlight the importance of participation and inclusion in this process. So open data, having data which are accessible to the population, and has as a basis, the fundamental basis is the process, the inclusion and the participation of communities. So in order to be able to secure tenure rights, to secure legitimate tenure rights, to combat corruption, we have to establish a sound process, which is a participatory process. So tools like Open Tenure, there are many on the ground. What is fundamental is the process that accompany the use of these tools, and the tool itself has to be designed and used accordingly to the voluntary guidelines principles in terms of women inclusion and safeguards for vulnerable people. And also I would like also to mention the youth, because this is an emerging issue, the inclusion of the youth in the process of securing tenure rights. So again, back to the experience in Sierra Leone. Then we have implemented the use of the open tenure system involving the communities, but not just the communities, involving also the government, because it's important, is very fundamental to have an understanding and a dialogue which includes all the stakeholders. So with the government as well, we have started
Maria Paula, if I may, I'm sorry, I need to enforce time limitations here. Would you please?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. Yes, sure. So I just wanted to stress that the importance of the inclusion and the participation of all the stakeholders, so that you can, even though there is not yet in place a law, but there is a provision for including and recognizing the customary rights, kickstart a process where this can be recognized. So this is what happened in Sierra Leone and also in Guatemala. I mean, that's all from my side, and thank you for giving me this time, Javier. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Paula. I think, unfortunately, we don't have much time, but I think that information can be made available. We can upload in the chat function some links to the documents where you can find more information on those specific country experiences, so that you can, inform yourself as to how these concrete experiences show what can be done to secure tenure rights and to promote a more open and transparent tenure system. I saw a question and a number of points dealing with not only securing tenure rights, land rights, but also how those rights are used and land use, how land is used, how land is managed in a sustainable way. And in this sense, the VGTs have also led to another further step, not only to secure tenure rights, but also to promote sustainable land use. And it is being done in joint work with the UNCCD, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and now a technical guide on land use, land degradation neutrality is being prepared based on the voluntary guidelines, which is another step forward to sustainability of livelihoods and food systems. In this connection, I would like to see and check if Aurélie Bress from FAO is online to briefly share with us what is being done with the UNCCD Convention to combat desertification. Over to you, Aurélie.
Hi, Javier, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you for all the presenters for their inspiring speeches and for all the participants. So as mentioned by Chris, indeed, the VGGT as a CFS policy product got a key uptake by a Rio Convention, the one on to combat desertification during the 14th Conference of Parties, where for the first time the parties wanted to encourage themselves to use the VGGT in the implementation of the convention, which opened the door to actually gain multiple benefits, because also by targeting land degradation neutrality to achieve some elements to leverage some difficulties that exist and to increase governance of tenure. For instance, challenges that are met when addressing land degradation are insecure tenure rights, which prevent people from adopting sustainable practices, whether on public land, whether on commons, or silo policy on tenure and LDN, which prevent effectiveness and which sometimes have a detrimental effect one on the other. Also, question of how to safeguard legitimate tenure right when there are interventions to promote ecosystem restoration, for instance, or to promote access to grievance and redress mechanisms for the most vulnerable. Also, how to promote gender equality so that everyone can actually engage into combating desertification. All that are the type of advice and an element that we want to bring forward in the technical guide that we are currently preparing with jointly with UNCCD, and that will be brought to the party during the next conference of parties of the Convention on Desertification. So in 2022, between May and September, dates are unknown. But it's true that and we can see also how the work that was mentioned by all the presenters on data transparency, on availability of data, or the work that presented Maria Paula on how to promote easy system to map rights and to engage into process are the one that needs also to be taken into account when coming to fighting desertification. So thank you very much, and we'll get back to the panelists.
Thank you, Aurélie. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now we know that the VGTs are being used not only to secure tenure rights, to improve governance of tenure, but also now leading to tools, technical guides to improve management, land management. And that's central if we want to secure the sustainability of food systems in the long run. Now, we have addressed some of the questions that have been posed through the questions and answer functions, as well as the chat function. And now, considering that we are running out of time, we are getting to the end, I would like to invite each one of our guest speakers to, let us hear from them the key message, some central ideas that they think we ought to take home, that we take with us when we go back to our work, how we can leverage this information, this knowledge. What would be some key messages that you would like to share with us today? I would like to start now with our colleague back to Seattle, Tim, to hear what he would like to remind us.
Thank you, Javier, and thank you to all the panelists. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to all the presentations. You know, so much great information here. I would just underline what Ellen and others have said, is that governments here are in the driver's seat, and governments often need help and need to be supported, not just by international donors, but also by nonprofit organizations to help them fulfill their goals and objectives around land data. And then second, underline the point that I think Laura emphasized in talking about the Open Up Guide, in that in the various, well, that land data is among the least open of government data, and Laura mentioned the several barriers to that. The one barrier I think that deserves underlining is that in many cases the formal land tenure data doesn't exist at all. That is, it still needs to be gathered, and the process by which it is gathered is so important, and the voluntary guidelines lay out the principles and more specifics about how that should be done. And the principles that I would just emphasize are the ones around gender equality, about participation of communities, about transparency, because how that data gets collected and the involvement of communities, and particularly vulnerable groups within that community, is going to be key to the quality of the data and whether it can be used to protect the most vulnerable. I'll stop there. Thanks, Javier.
Thank you, Tim. Now let's move on to and let's go back to Buenos Aires, and let's hear from Natalie.
Hi, everybody. So thanks for the amazing presentations. I'm going to go quickly to one point. Open data is seen as a super high technical type of policy, and there should be a place where we create a strategy from a technical point of view about the creation, the recollection, and the publication of data, taking into account privacy concerns. But at the same time, and as I said from the very beginning, you need to also create a strategy to connect with communities, to connect through community leaders, a strategy that actually addresses the way that community can be engaged within their own times and manners. So participation in their own terms, not trying to bring them into your own platform. Just go there, and participation from the very beginning of any open data policy.
All right, very good. Now talking about data, let's hear from our colleague Laura Melloloro from the Land Portal.
Thank you, Javier. One point. Well, just land data is crucial. It's crucial for good land governance, and can support decisions, policy, transparency, can be important drivers for innovation, economic and social development. But as my colleagues already stated, data governance is important. So the who and the how is very important. So the data governance should be put into the agenda of land governance, and more in general to the sustainable development agenda. So how data is collected, how data is published, who is part of the process, who has a voice, what data represents, what do they document. So the Open Data Charter and Land Portal Open Up Guide is a step towards that direction. And I hope there will be support and collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Well, clearly it seems that governments have a responsibility here. And so, but we have here the possibility to hear from a government representative, Honorable Helen Pratt. So I would like to invite her to, see what her message, the key message that she would like us to take away from this event will be.
Thank you very much. So I think so much has been said today, but I want us to remember this idea of the continuum of land rights. And as we develop these systems, I want us to look at fit for purpose and fit for context solutions that address the issues and challenges through a bottom-up approach, supporting inclusive processes that strengthen women's land rights, but also promote the rights of the most marginalized groups in our society. I ask that we continue to hold governments like myself accountable to ensure that these systems are not only developed, but they're implemented so that we continue to support equitable land rights and we continue to improve the lives of all of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen, for those words. And I think of this exchange, of this dialogue, I would like to now remind everyone that all the information of side events are concerning the CFS are in the website, the CFS website. And please remember that consultation, if you have the time, the land portal made a reference to. And so we hope that we will be in touch, continuing in our work to secure tenure rights and to promote improved governance of tenure through open and transparent land administration systems. With this, I would like to close, and I want to check with Land Portal if they would like to have a closing remark.
Laura, go ahead. Sure.
O'Neill, you can feel free to take the floor.
No, it's just like, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us here today. I've put in the chat the link to the Open Up Guide here that we published recently with the Open Data Charter. And so please look in it, and if you want to collaborate with us, if there's any other governments here today, we're definitely open to collaborating. We're looking for governments to pilot this, to pilot this guide. So please keep us in mind and reach out. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Have a great day for those who have the day ahead. A good afternoon for those who have the afternoon coming up soon. And we look forward to continue collaborating with you. Thank you.